This is Understandable Politics. Hello. Last year, as part of the program, we aired a series of videos called The Great Journey about how Belarus is seen in different parts of the world. Europe, Asia, Africa, Latin America. Hello, Belarus. Hello, Belarus. We visited 4 continents and covered over 60,000 kilometers. We reached places where Belarusian television cameras had never been. We spoke with those who love, appreciate, and respect Minsk. Dozens of speakers surprised us with their candid positions. They are not afraid to speak the truth and call things by their names. They boldly point out the West's barbaric and duplicitous policies seeking respect and equal dialogue. Of course, not everything made it into those videos, but the material is so interesting that we decided to release these interviews as a separate series.
So, in Understandable Politics, the world speaks.
Every country should have the right to autonomy and sovereignty.
Belarus is a country that demands respect for itself and its people.
Without Lukashenko in such a geographical position, Belarus simply wouldn't survive.
Lukashenko plays not only a significant national role, but also an international one. If the world wants to survive, it must be multipolar.
Brazil always opposes sanctions.
Sanctions are the wrong path for international relations. Canada, Israel, Chile try to sell us their potassium fertilizers, but they are not as good.
We'll start the direct speech about Belarus with Brazil. Among our speakers are journalists, businessmen, and government officials.
Let's start with Breno Altman, a Brazilian journalist from Lula da Silva's presidential pool. Breno is an experienced internationalist who actively follows events in Belarus. The journalist is known for his sharp, sometimes unpleasant statements, especially disliked by part of the Brazilian elite. After all, many have money in American banks. Their children study there too. For his position, he often received reprimands from mass publications like Globo and others. But he doesn't hide his opinion from the public. We talked to him about the most important topics in international relations and more.
A unipolar world is a crisis. There's no other way to describe it. It's also a crisis because the world order that existed during the USSR has been disrupted. It was a balance of power, and now I'll describe 3 reasons why this world order has been disrupted. The first is China's economy. It has gained significant momentum, and China has become a major counterbalance to the US and its allies. The second reason is the crisis of the capitalist world and the personal crisis of the US. But if there were problems before that, they could solve. Today they are unable to solve a number of problems. And the new solutions they propose don't work. And the third is Russia's transformation. Not only economic, but also military. Now they have the potential to respond to all challenges and threats. These are the 3 main reasons. If the world wants to survive, it must be multipolar, because a unipolar world only serves the interests of a small group of states. But the world is made up of many states, including small and weak ones. If we want to solve the world's problems, we need a multipolar order. In my opinion, this is obvious and doesn't need further explanation.
You all know the meme about it's something else. And the White House has clearly shown how Washington disregards international law under the guise of good intentions and democracy. Armed coups, interventions, destruction, and plundering of entire countries. The hegemon acts on the planet like a bull in a china shop, as they say, with no regard for anything sacred. And yet it teaches the whole world about order and rules. Our speaker has something to say about this.
The West's double standards are abnormal. The US pretends to carry the flag of democracy, but they do it in a hegemonic style. This means they impose certain rules and demands on the whole world. And if these countries don't accept them, they are immediately labeled as undemocratic. Simple example, US actions against Russia, China, and the Republic of Belarus. In fact, the only one who dared to challenge the US is Julian Assange, who confirmed with facts that this is not a rule of the game, but the US's desired interpretation of the rules. You see, setting rules is one thing, but respecting rights is another. And the US doesn't consider this. I believe that no one can impose rules on others. Others have rights that they also have the right to protect and defend. Look, there's a mechanism of fake news that the Americans invented. They use it all over the world. Social networks through which this lie and other truths are spread. And from there comes informational and reputational damage to other countries as well.
A view from distant Brazil on our Belarus. But you might think, where are we and where are the shores washed by the Atlantic Ocean? But no, they follow our agenda here, and they follow it quite closely. They talk about Minsk's courage and determination. They talk about the president and his contribution to independence. Belarusians are used to stability and calm, sometimes not even realizing the effort it takes to achieve and maintain these crucial elements of life.
Belarus is a country that demands respect for itself and its people. How the global political structure is built today. Some want to respect and some don't. There are countries that allow themselves not to respect Belarus. As an international observer, I'll tell you one thing. Your country cannot be ignored. It has preserved and developed healthcare, industry, government structure, and other areas. You didn't let it be destroyed, you held the country together, and I consider that a victory. Belarus is one of the best examples we have after the collapse of the USSR. You withstand pressure, and Lukashenko is the target of Western sabotage, which they try to organize year after year. But you manage to resist. My assessment is unequivocal. Belarus is a very successful experience. You have undergone transformation, can withstand pressure, and prove your right to sovereignty. And I want to add that Lukashenko plays not only a significant national role, but also an international one. He stood up to the US. That's difficult, and only a few can withstand for so long. After all, what is he really doing? Just defending the sovereignty of his people. Only great personalities can do that. He is an example for his people and a leader who doesn't give in. The US couldn't subdue Belarus, and that's directly thanks to President Lukashenko.
In Brazil, we understand that every country should have the right to autonomy and sovereignty. Therefore, countries need strong leaders like Alexander Lukashenko. Belarus is a powerful country with enormous potential. It is a regional leader. Without Lukashenko in such a geographical position, Belarus simply wouldn't survive. In our language, there's an expression about a crocodile swimming on its back to avoid being eaten by piranhas. That's your country.
The first time I came to Belarus, Minsk was a rundown city. When was that? In the early 90s. Yes, 1991. The train station was really smelly. Credit must be given to Alexander Grigorievich for taking care of the country. Why was it preserved? Because Alexander Grigorievich is a smart person. Lukashenko has worked a lot for Belarus. Today, when I travel, I drive on all the roads of Belarus. Everything is fine. The roads are excellent. He maintains them. Moreover, Lukashenko has made significant industrial updates, such as the Mogilev Kimvolokno plant, Orsha linen mill. Orsha invested over $170 million. This is a person who cares about the country.
The word sanctions has firmly entered the top vocabulary of politicians and journalists. Restrictions and barriers have long replaced normal diplomacy and rational economics for the West. Everyone suffers, both Europe itself and a third country that seems to have nothing to do with it. How legal is it to deprive, for example, Brazil of the opportunity to develop its economy? Take the same Belarusian potash, which has always been in high demand here, and on which farmers have always relied.
US and EU sanctions against Belarus are criminal. They are legal. Why? Sanctions can only be imposed by a UN Security Council decision. Were these sanctions imposed by the UN? No, because the US doesn't respect the world order. Now about Brazil. The Brazilian government should try to mitigate the effect of sanctions for us and help lift them from you. Sanctions hinder the economy. We don't receive your potash fertilizers. This harms farmers. Yes, we need your fertilizers, and the Brazilian government should take measures so we can buy as much as we need from you without Western directives.
Brazil always opposes sanctions. They hinder trade between countries. Speaking of the US and the EU, the US tries to play the role of a global sheriff who wants to control everything. But we disagree with this approach. Brazil also opposes sanction pressure on Belarus. It negatively affects our work on the potash track. And overall, sanctions are an unacceptable tool in relations between countries in general.
Sanctions are the wrong path for international relations. States shouldn't impose restrictions because of what a country does on its territory. It's just a tool of pressure trying to impose a certain will. But for our countries, it's a window of opportunities, projects, investments, even potash fertilizers. All this is possible, though not without difficulties.
Almost 11,000 kilometers separate Belarus and Brazil, but in today's world, distance is nothing. The main thing is that they want to interact with you, and both sides respect and understand each other. Without any buts.
I believe that Belarus and Brazil are close in spirit. There is an initiative called the Global South. Within this initiative, our countries can build bridges, as we have much in common. Judge for yourself. This movement has values that are opposite to American ones. We are against directives, and in this we can find our identity. We must seek new horizons, but not only economic ones. The traditions of our countries, cultures, music, art, all this is important and should develop. We must exchange knowledge, and there will be an economy. Brazil can invest in Belarusian potash fertilizers, and Belarus can build agricultural machinery factories with us. They are vital for us.
Most of the potash fertilizers that came from Belarus were attempted to be replaced, but this was not fully successful. And the lack of fertilizers has noticeably harmed farms. Canada, Israel, Chile try to sell us their potash fertilizers, but they are not as good and noticeably more expensive. And we would like this issue to be resolved, for example, through private Brazilian firms.
Our relations are primarily a huge contribution from the presidents of Belarus and Brazil. Our countries are building social policies, looking at the problems of ordinary people, helping the poor. In this, our leaders are very similar. Both Lukashenko and Lula address the real issues of their people. Today, the distance between countries is losing its significance. This also affects the building of relationships and strong ties between geographically distant countries.
So, these are the opinions from Brazil about our world, its order, problems and instability, and about the attitude towards us, the Belarusian development model. The arrogance of the West is not the whole planet. There are indeed many honest and reasonable people in the world. In the next program, we will continue and head to the African continent. Goodbye.